Barack Obama revels in Russia's economic woes, praising the US's sanctions against Moscow. This hour, then, we look at that and other powerful and controversial statements from his State of the Union address. Coming up too, the business world's cream of the crop kick off their annual gathering in Switzerland with slashed global growth forecasts and plunging oil prices, leaving many in Davos far from upbeat. Live comment coming up from there. And also too, the violence in eastern Ukraine intensifies. Now 4 civilians, including a child, have reportedly been killed as more residential areas come under heavy shelling. Live at 5 from the RT News Centre in Moscow, it's Kevin Owen with you. Thanks for your company. Our top story then, seeking more war powers to crush Islamic State and celebrating sanctions against Russia. The US president has laid out his agenda for 2015 in his State of the Union address. Our Washington correspondent Ganity Chikan's been listening in closely.
The president has asked Congress to authorize the continued war against the Islamic State terrorist group. The U.S. is already carrying out airstrikes against ISIS in Iraq and Syria, but President Obama says it's going to be a long fight, and that's why he needs the authority.
American leadership, including our military power, is stopping ISIL's advance. Instead of getting dragged into another ground war in the Middle East, we are leading a broad coalition, including Arab nations, to degrade and ultimately destroy this terrorist group. We're also supporting a moderate opposition in Syria that can help us in this effort.
President Obama also said the U.S. reserves the right to act unilaterally as it goes about fighting terrorists around the world. Then he went on to speak about what he sees as his administration's foreign policy successes. On Russia, he said sanctions are working. Quote, Russia is isolated with its economy in tatters. That's how America leads, not with bluster, but with persistent, steady resolve, end of quote. It was interesting to hear about persistent, steady resolve because in the very next sentence, President Obama went on to speak about how the decades-old policy of sanctions and isolation against Cuba has failed and how his administration decided to finally end that. On Iran, he said, quote, new sanctions passed by this Congress at this moment in time will all but guarantee that diplomacy fails. So the president told Congress that he would veto any new sanctions bill. We heard a lot about American leadership and how it should lead, not only in the fight against terror, but also in global economy. Here's an example of such leadership.
China wants to write the rules for the world's fastest growing region. That would put our workers and our businesses at a disadvantage. Why would we let that happen? We should write those rules.
President Obama was speaking about the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement that he's pushing for. But the way he put it sounded like a zero-sum game where one side wins and the other has to lose. Whereas many in the world, would like to see a more win-win approach in U.S. foreign policy. There was little in the speech to indicate that. In Washington, I'm Ganity Chikan, RT.
Well, Barack Obama highlighted America's support to the Syrian rebels, too, as part of the campaign to crush Islamic State in his speech. Let's see what that's going to imply. Washington is sending around 1,000 troops to train Syrian opposition forces. 400 are expected to be deployed within the next few weeks. The cost of funding and arming the Syrian rebels will reach about $500 million then. But critics say Washington's aid may end up in the wrong hands. Some members of the fragmented Syrian opposition did recently join Islamic State, taking their weapons with them. Political analyst Chris Bambury told me Obama's administration is continuing then the policy of wars started by his predecessor.
He came in promising to be a peace president. Obama has presided over as many deaths and wars as his predecessor. So he's seen a continuation, essentially, of George W. Bush Jr.'s foreign policy. So again, not really a success story. And the idea that the Americans have driven back Islamic State in Iraq and Syria is almost laughable. There have been some slight reverses for Islamic State. They continue to hold a land area now as large as it was before the Americans began the intervention. And there is no sign of them being driven out of that anytime soon.
Well, as for the US stance on Russia, as we've heard, Barack Obama directed more harsh rhetoric at Moscow, claiming it's isolated, whereas Washington stands strong and united with his allies. For his part, Russia's foreign ministry responded by saying all attempts to isolate Russia are fruitless. Chris Banbury again pointing out Washington's sanctions policy is taking a toll on its allies in Europe.
For the Americans, there's very little cost in terms of sanctions against Russia. It's the Europeans who are going to have to pick up the tab. And one of the reasons why the European economy is going into such a bad place is because they rely more on trade with Russia, and sanctions against Russia are hitting Europe at a time when actually the European economy needs every boost it can get. So Obama, in a sense, is using these sanctions against Russia at the cost of the Europeans. So in a sense, he's laughing up his sleeve.
Chris Banbury. But Barack Obama's State of the Union address certainly triggered reaction on both sides of the US and across the globe. But fashion spotters also might have been drawn to his wife, what she was wearing last night. There's always a lighter side to it, isn't it? Michelle Obama sported the same outfit, if you'd got an eagle eye, as the character in the TV drama The Good Wife, who's also married to a powerful Chicago politician. Well, aside from the wardrobe watching, get the inside track on what really mattered at last night's Capitol Hill event with more analysis and expert opinion from us at RT.com.
Right from the scene. First-rate news and eye-gripping pictures. On our reporters' Twitter and Instagram. To be in the know, follow us online.
It's the first day of the annual World Economic Forum in Davos, where the business elite get together with top politicians for a hard think and talk about the world's most pressing problems. And indeed, there are a lot to tackle too. But one issue the participants at Davos won't have to worry about is their own safety. Take a look at these pictures. If you look really closely, we'll give you a close-up there. Security measures have been beefed up. You see on the top of the roof there, snipers have been deployed even on the tops of rooftops. There are roughly 2 Swiss soldiers for every attendee, apparently. But back to the business. The tumbling oil price has taken centre stage in those discussions on the opening day. Murad Gazdiev explains why.
What's becoming clear is that it's not only the poorer countries, the developing countries and oil exporters that are going to be in pain because of collapsing oil prices. We heard, in fact, the Iraqi Deputy Prime Minister say that the world has a responsibility to consider what this is doing, what these free-falling crude prices are doing to the economies of oil exporters. Iraq, for example, desperately needs its money to fight ISIS, money that it is now losing. But what we also found out today, or what was made quite clear, is that the Western world, the developed countries, for them, collapsing oil prices aren't going to be quite as much of a boon as they led people to believe, because now that oil prices are so low, investment is stopping, and that investment is badly needed to drill in new locations, to supply oil for the future. In fact, we heard the president of Total, the CEO of Total, France's energy giant, say that his company is wrapping up investment into North Sea oil, which provides so much money for Norway, for the United Kingdom. It's wrapping up investment into fracking in the United States, because there's just oversupply everywhere, and his company is going into austerity mode.
Well, on Tuesday, the International Monetary Fund slashed to its world growth forecast for this year and next, and it appears the business leaders in Davos are just a bit pessimistic about it. Apparently, only 37% of those asked believe that the world economy will improve over the next year, down from 44% last year. Let's talk about the doom and gloom, or not maybe, with Dr. Karen Knessel, who's an independent energy analyst. Hi there, Doctor. Thanks for being with us. There might be a bit of an echo on the line, so I'll keep my question kind of brief. Are you downbeat about the world economy? And as you see it, where's it going to go?
Well, it definitely is of a tremendous issue, because as it has just been explained, the decline in oil rigs and the cost issue is of issue to everybody. And it's not only the oil price decline that we have seen over the past 6 months. Already in last summer, several analysts warned that several projects, in particular in the Arctic, but also the unconventional, such as fracking, shale oil, shale gas, are only commercial if a price is beyond $120, $150. So with a price below 50, as these days, definitely a lot of projects will have to be suspended.
What else is on the lips of the delegates there, then, top of the agenda?
Excuse me, I didn't get the question. It's the connection is bad.
Yeah, a bit of an echo. As I say, what else are the delegates talking about there, importantly?
The question to me, well, unfortunately, personally, I'm not in Davos myself, but of course the decline of the oil price is the reflection of a world recession that is much worse than several had expected it to be. When we take the most important consumers, such as Japan, for instance, which has gone from a stagnation into a fully fledged recession, and it's not only a matter of macroeconomic figures, especially in a country like Japan, it's also an issue of demography. So with huge oil consumers going down all the way, of course, the world recession is worse than some had thought it could be.
Back to the oil price. We've had some guests telling RT that they think oil prices are going to bounce back maybe to around $100 a barrel in a year or two. Do you concur with that?
No, I don't at all, because the oil price of 100, we also have to take into that the geopolitical risk prime, which always was something like 30 to 35 US dollar. And this geopolitical risk prime, interestingly enough, has completely gone out. One reason for that is the rapprochement that we have seen over the last year between the United States and Iran. In spite of the fact that we have geopolitical upheavals in many parts of the world, there is no such thing as a geopolitical risk prime these days. I expect the price to go up to, let's say, maybe something in the range within 50 to 70. But it's the geopolitical risk prime is not there anymore for the time being.
Of course, OPEC Secretary General is going to be there at Davos. I guess he's going to be in for criticism from a number of parties. Is he going to take any notice?
Well, it's not easy to be a Secretary General of OPEC. It's not easy these days. It never was easy in the past. But I would say it's OPEC to consider OPEC as the scapegoat, like some do these days, because it didn't cut production at the last November meeting, is not the right assessment of the situation. OPEC supplies something like 42% of the market, and another 56% of the market is supplied by non-OPEC producers. And currently we see, for instance, a very high production in Russia. We see high production in some other non-OPEC producing states. So the oversupply is coming not only from
Saudi Arabia is being
OPEC.
mainly held responsible here, aren't they? They're part of OPEC.
Well, Saudi Arabia has many other issues to solve, and I imagine the current internal struggle for succession to an ailing King Abdullah, because this is the death of King Abdullah could create many more problems than just an internal political strife. We see already now in Saudi Arabia a harsh debate within the House of Saud. Is this the right course that is currently taken by the Saudi government when it comes to keeping the production share?
Dr. Karen Knessel, independent energy analyst, thank you for your thoughts on RT. Sorry about these small sound problems there. So, grappling with big economic questions is one thing, but reining in delicate zone spending on the event is quite